Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear conference participants. Thank you very much again for being here with us today. Throughout the conference today, we will have 3 panels during the day. The first panel will be on the future of the Euro-Mediterranean cooperation in the view of political instability and economic uncertainty in the region. It will be moderated by Dr. Bojinović-Fenko. Speakers on the panel. I look forward to the discussion. I would just like to draw your attention, since we are starting an academic quarter. I believe that universities more or less all over the Mediterranean start 15 minutes past the hour. We will also most probably finish with an academic quarter at 11:15. I would like to also let you know that this conference is video streamed, so all your colleagues can see it through the internet, through the website of EMUNI. And if you are tweeting, and we would be very happy if you tweet about us, you can mention us with @EMUNI, and you can use the hashtag science diplomacy, and we'll of course be retweeting your tweets. Thank you very much. Enjoy the panel, and we look forward to the discussions.
Thank you, Spela, for this kind introduction. Good morning, everyone, dear guests, colleagues, professors, researchers, students, NGO directors, ambassadors, politicians, experts in the field, international organization functionaries, colleagues interested in Europe-Mediterranean cooperation and science diplomacy. Welcome to the morning panel. I am Ana Bojinović-Fenko, and I have been asked to moderate the panel by the organizers, so I thank Professor Hamid El-Zuhairi for inviting me, and also for bringing together such a diverse group of speakers. I think they will offer highly relevant insights from various perspectives. They work in different fields of cooperation and also at different levels of international cooperation, but all on the Mediterranean regional affairs. Before we start with the substance of the panel, I would like to turn to its form. Each of the panelists will be introduced very shortly and then given a word to make an introductory speech of about 5 minutes. And after they have all presented their initial views, we will turn to you, distinguished audience, to reply, give comments, give views, broaden the debate. So please actively participate. And after the debate, we have been given a kind disposition of 2 hours. So we have enough time for a reflection and discussion. And after the debate, all the panelists will have an opportunity to make a short closing remark. Now, as the title of the panel suggests, that despite political instability and economic uncertainty in the Mediterranean region, prospects for future cooperation, of course, do exist, but they need to be carefully identified and then strengthened or worked upon. And one of these prospects, as suggested by the title of the EMUNI conference, is also in the field of and by science diplomacy. Now, let me start with a maybe provocative thesis that in the view of intergovernmental political cooperation in the Mediterranean, not a lot has changed in the last 100 years, because in 1910 there was a regional governmental organization founded called International Commission for Scientific Exploration of the Mediterranean Sea, which still exists and has about 25 member states, littoral Mediterranean and other interested states. But in its founding treaty, it explicitly says that this is not a political organization, but it is an organization of functional cooperation on the scientific exploration of the Med. And if we turn to a current situation and the efforts within the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership and then later Union for the Mediterranean, we see that all high-level diplomatic and economic dialogues and prospects for partnership have not turned out the way they were planned. And currently, the Union for the Mediterranean operates only at the level of 6 functional cooperation priority projects, EMUNI being one of them. So in the light of this status quo, if we might provocatively call it, I call upon the speakers to address from their points of view, from their expertise, potential for future cooperation in the Mediterranean region. So with no further ado, I turn to our first speaker. This is Professor Rim Ayadi. Welcome. Ayadi, I'm sorry. She is professor at HEC Montreal and also director of International Institute for Cooperatives, and she leads international research initiative on cooperative finance. She is also affiliated to EMUNI as senior research fellow, and as an expert on banking and international finance, she has been advising to various bodies of the European Commission, European Parliament, and Assembly of the Mediterranean. So with these expertise, we ask her to give an insight on political and socio-economic model in the South Mediterranean region post-Arab Spring. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to be here, first of all, to share some views on the Euro-Mediterranean, socioeconomic cooperation in the Euro-Mediterranean, and also what are the prospects for cooperation in the region. Let me, first of all, start with a global outlook. Where are we in terms of the economic situation, which is quite grim if we look at it from the outset. First of all, we are experiencing an uneven global recovery. In fact, the majority of the countries in the world, they are growing at minimum levels. I mean, the IMF and the World Bank, they are talking about 1 to 2 to 3%. And this is not enough to really drive the economies, the global economies, into where they should be going. Now, in terms of the looking at the Eurozone, as you know very well, the economic crisis is still lingering, and with the difficulties to having some serious agreements on Greece, this might even lead to further complication for the recovery in the EU. Now, going back to the South Mediterranean countries, obviously one very important dimension is the increase of, the decrease of price of oil, which have some ramifications, especially for the exporting countries, less for the importing countries, but for the specific instabilities and geopolitical instabilities where the region is going, there are some serious uncertainties. And this would lead certainly to some risks and opportunities in the region. Now, obviously, having more of this low prices of oil might lead to some turbulences in the future. And even the IMF, up to today, they do not know exactly where this would stop. And this obviously have implications for the region. Now, in the Middle East, the deepening conflicts are having some regional and serious spillovers. Based on some estimates, there are almost 11 million refugees that are internally and externally displaced people around the region, going from Libya up to Syria and Iraq. There are some sectarian violences and political spillovers within the region, plus obviously, this has implications on the bilateral and transit trade and FDI, foreign direct investment. And this is actually the least I could say, because without talking about the risk premiums in the countries themselves, and then obviously there are some serious setbacks on the tourism and the remittances. So in terms of the economic situation of the region, the least I can say, it's again a grim situations in the countries that we're talking about. Now, I agree with you. You mentioned decades, 100 probably years of cooperation, but I only can go back to 40 years, and again, the least I can say, it's the status quo. And we have done some work a couple of years ago trying to understand really what are the scenarios of Euro-Mediterranean cooperation. This was a project which has been funded under FP7, Framework Program 7, and we have later on developed, followed up with the Euro-Mediterranean Economists Association, and now we are working further on several economic studies to understand really what are the solutions for these issues in the region. Now, the reference scenario before the Arab Spring, I think it's still prevailing. We are still talking about intergovernmentalization of the Euro-Med relations through, again, bilateral agreement among the EU member states and the Mediterranean countries, or the EU or with the, some of the Mediterranean countries. Again, this reference, or I call it the status quo, it's not working anymore because there has been a serious crisis within the last years, and for the moment the region is going to what we call the red transition, which is the Euro-Mediterranean under threat. And we can see the threat through the spillovers, the terrorist organization, which are to a certain extent taking some areas over and going to spill over other regions from the west to the east. And this is clearly what is happening, pushing some external actors like the US and others to interfere in the region. And this is with some ramifications, as you know very well, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, which has not been really leading to some serious and positive outcomes. So having the same scenario, which is apparently being developed again, may not have the outcomes, the positive outcomes you would be looking at. Now, what we see, at least from the outset, is there is a kind of a weakening, which is a natural weakening of the cooperation schemes between the South and the North, simply because the European Union is also living its own internal crisis, and then, of course, it is very difficult to be looking outside with a strong leadership, because this strong leadership is unfortunately missing in the region. And then on the Arab side, there is also no such of a strong leadership to move really both regions together. And this obviously leads to serious economic setbacks and loss in economic value. Now, we have done some estimations based on the model that we have developed together with other partners on the future of the Euro-Mediterranean. And clearly, under this red transition or scenario of the Euro-Mediterranean under threat, using really very simple assumptions, not the worst assumption possible, we're talking about a loss of value of minimum 5 trillion as compared to the reference scenario of the 2010, if these countries would have moved into their development up to 4% a year. And this did not happen since 2010. So it means that the loss of value up to 2030, if we make the estimation up to 2030, it's minimum 5 trillion for the whole region. And this is a loss in gross domestic product. And we can see it, for example, just we take a case of Libya, and I've seen the data for the in the World Bank this year, 21% of GDP lost in 1 year. So what does it mean in terms of the loss of value, and what can be done really to bring this region from this conflict, or call it the Euro-Mediterranean under threat, to more sustainable future? And this is what we actually trying to do, and eventually give some new schemes of development, just living into a what I call a crisis management environment, going beyond what the economic theory is telling us. So really accepting the risks and trying to manage them. And this is what brings me also to what I do in financial market: accept the risk and try to manage the risks you have. This means you need to have a different view about also stability, about losses, and so on and so forth. And this needs some collaborative and cooperative vision between the South and the North from an economic, social, and political point of view. Is it possible? Politically, I do not know, and I can say maybe not. But I think, and that is why I think it is very important that the science and scientific and research community would push these factors to another level, which is really creating more cooperation, more ties in science, technology, and innovation and research, because it's a long-term factor, and we need to think long-term rather than just being confined to the short-term, where there are crises, instabilities, and further risks. And I think for me, this is the key. And I think the science community would be a very important lever for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ayadi. We turn to our second speaker, Professor Hany Helal, who is professor at Cairo University and also speaking in the capacity of former Egyptian Minister of Higher Education and Research. As an expert in science and technology and innovation policies and of course higher education reform, he has been working not only at the Egyptian national level, but also as in the Egyptian embassy in Paris, also as coordinator of international exchange programs like Tempus, EU-sponsored programs of scientific cooperation like CIHEAM, and also UNESCO Regional Office for Science and Technology in Arab states. So we ask him to maybe reflect on the potential of collaboration between these two levels of cooperation, so national and international, for the future in the Mediterranean. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for inviting me to this eminent gathering. I would like to thank Hamid, Professor Zuhairi, and EMUNI management for inviting me. Taking into consideration the 5 minutes, I'll try to divide my intervention into analysis, because what we are talking about is the science diplomacy. It's a combination between science, which is our profession, and the diplomacy, which you know very well. Let me maybe start with historical analysis from my personal experience, going to the actual status in the region, and maybe some wishes and the future perspective from my point of view. If we go back, concerning the science diplomacy, if we remember after the Second World War, there was some international movement trying to get peace especially in Europe. And all of us know what is called CERN. CERN was the first initiative in order to get states together, science together, and there was this well-known slogan, "Science for Peace." If we go more on, on this direction, personally, in the 90s, there was another initiative for the Middle East. It's called RELIMAR, Reducing Earthquake Losses in the East Mediterranean region. It was a UNESCO USGS initiative, including Israel, Palestine, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, other countries, Iran, Turkey. And the idea again was science for peace, getting all people together in a place and to try to work together. After that, on the personal level as well, there was this CIHEAM that you will hear tomorrow about it. We have Bojinović and Salam with us today, and again, this is a science diplomacy, science for peace, and these initiatives were on the governmental level. It means that governments were trying to get together, put scientists together in order to move forward for peace and stability. I remember in 2005-06, we were working with the European Commission, and everyone in the world was talking about brain drain, especially developing countries. You train your young generation. You have scientists, you have researchers. They go outside. You never go back. After that, there was the UN famous slogan program called Brain Gain, in order to get people get back, but it didn't work. We came up with a very intelligent, a program called Brain Circulation. We said, okay, this is a good idea. Let us keep everyone where he or she is and get him or her circulate, come and go. And I think it still needs some work, some mechanism to be done. We in Egypt, on the national level, in 2006, we declared what we called the Science and Technology Decade for Egypt. And we invented the science and technology, or science diplomacy, in which we put some mechanism, which is a science and technology year, or a science year between Egypt and some countries. We started in 2007 with Germany, after that Japan, Italy, France, United States, European Commission, etc. The idea behind was get brains together, get masterminds together, get people working together. This is a new type of stability. Unfortunately, in 2011, started what we call the Arab Spring. I call it a tornado, in the region. We will not, I'm not here to discuss why. I think we have a politician maybe that we can discuss on coffee break or during lunch. But what is the consequences of such Arab Spring or the tornado in the region? Is that all these countries now is being, either closed or completely in trouble. What about scientists? What about our colleague professors? What about the young generation? Should we sit down here together, discuss and say, okay, this is a good science diplomacy that we can do? What can we do? Should we work to save them? What I would like to propose to you is that should we, I propose to launch a program. We can call it brain protection. We need to protect these young generation in our region. It's not anymore a diplomacy. We can call it a sauvetage. We need to save these people. Can we make some sort of new initiative called brain incubation? Could EMUNI take the initiative to make an incubator here and get the young Arab talented generation come here and we can protect them? I have many things to to say. I think we have here with us the Arab University Union. We have the UFM. The UFM, there was a very promising initiative called Mobility South-South. Can we do something for that? I would like to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this food for thought for our audience. Professor Helal, I think they will definitely respond to your initiative. Our next speaker is Ambassador Liegis, Latvian ambassador to Hungary, also accredited to Montenegro, Croatia, and Slovenia. Ambassador Liegis has had in his rich diplomatic career has been working accredited to states and also international organizations, especially the EU and the NATO, where he has focused mainly on foreign affairs, defense and security issues. But of course, in the light of Latvian current presidency over the Council of the EU, we ask the Ambassador Liegis to reflect on the EU's priorities current and future for the Mediterranean. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna, for those words of introduction. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today in Portorož and, as you mentioned, really represent the current presidency of the Council of the European Union, Latvia. Now, for those of us that were here yesterday at the opening session, I can assure you that I won't be sending anybody to hell in a pleasant way, as I think our colleague Ilan mentioned, but clearly I will be focusing more on diplomacy and not on science. And personally, it was very interesting to hear what Minister Erjavec said yesterday, that Slovenia does consider it very important to promote science diplomacy with science attaches. It's certainly something that Latvia isn't focusing on currently, because our short-term focus at the moment is very much running the presidency of the Council of the European Union. Now, although the Baltic and Mediterranean seas may be very far apart, certainly Latvia considers that Europe's southern Mediterranean neighbours are as much the neighbours of Latvia as they are neighbours of Spain, Slovenia, or the last EU presidency country, Italy. And just as I think for me, the first time being in this particular part of Slovenia, it was a great revelation to visit Piran, a real pearl, yesterday. I would also mention that the capital of Latvia, Riga, is also in many ways a pearl of Art Nouveau architecture and an ancient Hanseatic city over 800 years old. But let me turn to the question of the current Latvian priorities of the presidency. As you probably know, Latvia took over from Italy on the 1st of January, so it's just over a month ago. And it's right that our presidency is very much guided by three things. First of all, we have to remember that since the Treaty of Lisbon, the presidencies are run in a way of the trio presidencies. So Latvia is second of the trio. We had Italy, first of all, Latvia, and then Luxembourg will be taking over from Latvia on the 1st of July of this year. The other point to bear in mind is that in June last year, just before we had the changes within the Commission and the European parliamentary elections, the European Council, so the heads of state and government of the European Union member states, essentially adopted a strategic agenda for the European Union, and in that they talked about effective joint action in the world. So those are the guidelines, the second of the guidelines. So we have the trio presidency, the European Council, and the third guidelines of our priorities is really the based on the 10 priorities that the new Commission President Juncker elaborated when he took over office. And these 10 priorities include a new policy on migration and Europe as a stronger global actor. So that's essentially the framework in which Latvia enunciated its priorities. And our priorities are based not on A, B, and C, but they are in fact based on what's called C, D, and E. And these are competition, the digital agenda, and engaged Europe. Now, I think our cooperation with the Mediterranean comes in at various points within those, but clearly, I think primarily the question of engaged Europe is something that I want to address, because I think that EU cooperation, the Euro-Mediterranean cooperation, should be placed in the wider context of Europe wanting to become more of a global actor, particularly concerning the European Union's neighbourhood policy. And I think it's also worth remembering that with the changes of the new Commission, neighbourhood policy has now gone under one particular commissioner, Commissioner Hany, who is responsible not only for neighbourhood policy, but also for the enlargement portfolio. In the last Commission, we had one specific commissioner who was responsible for enlargement. And given that the European neighbourhood policy is really just over 10 years old, it was kicked off in 2004, it's probably worth just reminding ourselves the basis on which it came about. It was developed with the objective of avoiding the emergence of new dividing lines between the enlarged European Union and our neighbours, and instead strengthening the prosperity, stability and security of all. And of course it's based on the values of democracy, rule of law and respect for human rights. So remember that the enlargement of the European Union, the big enlargement, took place in 2004 when Slovenia joined, when Latvia joined and many other countries joined, and that's when the Union started to look at its neighbourhood policy in more details. During Latvia's presidency, future action within the neighbourhood policy will basically be guided by the Commission's Green Book, and this is a document that is going to be produced in a month or so, and we, Latvia, feel that it's very important that both regional dimensions of the neighbourhood policy should be balanced and developed on an equal footing. So obviously we have the Eastern Partnership on the one hand and the Southern Neighbourhood Policy on the other hand. But it's clear that earlier decisions of EU leaders and combined with our own regional expertise means that our presidency will of course be focusing more on the Eastern Partnership than on the Southern neighbourhood. And it's probably right to remember that the neighbourhood policy has the ability to change the lives of millions of people in Europe's neighbourhood. It can bring about more security, stability and economic well-being, but experience shows that it's necessary to develop essentially an individual approach for our neighbouring countries, and I think this is something that we've certainly come to realise, that the individuality of each of the groups needs to be addressed. But nevertheless, the overarching aims remain the promotion and development of stable and secure regions based on democracy, human rights and the rule of law. We, Latvia, acknowledge that there is a particular challenge posed in the southern neighbourhood, whether this be the fight against terrorism or the tragedies of migrants and refugees wanting to enter European Union territory through the southern rim. And indeed, as we've seen, homegrown terrorism through the phenomenon of foreign terrorist fighters has directly affected Latvia's presidency in the first week. With the attacks in Paris, it became clear that we needed to focus on anti-terrorism within our presidency. This meant that the ministers of interior, when they met in Riga at the end of January, adopted already a programme and a strong statement outlining how the issues of anti-terrorism could be met during our presidency. And today there is an informal meeting of heads of state and government in Brussels, and once again we see that the question of terrorism is very high on the agenda as a result of those events in Paris. So any presidency obviously may have its priorities, but events tend to get in the way and knock into the presidency. And I think it's worth recalling that just 1 year ago, when we had the Greek presidency, of course, we had a fundamental change in the whole of the security situation in Europe, with Russia essentially invading, annexing part of a neighbouring country, Ukraine, and we also are very much aware that today this issue is still very much on the agenda with the president of France, Chancellor Merkel, meeting in Minsk with Presidents Poroshenko and Presidents Putin. So those are perhaps just some of the insights that I wanted to start with, and very much look forward to any questions that you may have. And I would mention that in contrast to our first speaker who referred to the long-term view, obviously the EU presidency of the Council is focusing a little bit more on the short term. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Liegis. Our next speaker is Dr. Salam Kawakibi, Deputy Director of Arab Reform Initiative and President of Initiative for a New Syria. Dr. Kawakibi has been working as a researcher and a higher education teacher at various institutions around Europe and the Mediterranean, University of St. Andrews, Atlantic Council, Sorbonne, Paris, University of Amsterdam, and Institut Français de Proche-Orient, Syria, among them. So as a political scientist and expert on international relations, he's a very relevant speaker to assess prospects for future cooperation in the Med. Please, the floor is yours, Dr. Kawakibi.
Thank you very much. First of all, I thank my friend in EMUNI for their invitation, and I apologize for my exotic English. Of course, as I am Syrian, French-Syrian or Syrian-French citizen, I can be a Mediterranean representative of north and south of this area. And I will talk to you about Syria now, because I feel as a Syrian that we used to forget what's happening in this moment in Syria. Yesterday, only yesterday, 200 people was dying in front of Lampedusa, coming from Libya on boat in the real tornado. It's not, and in the same day, in the same hours, perhaps, 200 other people was killed in neighborhood of Damascus by barrel bomb from the Syrian army aviation. Every day we have such humanitarian issue. Now we can talk about 9 million Syrian out of their home, 7 million displaced inside Syria, and 3 to 4 million outside Syria. We can talk about 56% of the health infrastructure who is completely destroyed. Also, we can talk about the education. We have now at least 3 years without any schools or university can work on majority of the Syrian ground. Of course, what is very sad that the Syrian people feel themselves completely forgotten by their neighbor, and not very far neighbor. It's normally to be forgotten by the United States, especially with the Obama administration, but to be forgotten by the European states and to be forgotten by their friends in the Mediterranean area, it's a very sad issue. In Syria now, we talk about more than 200,000 died by the regime, and 60,000 members of the army and the security forces killed by the rebels. And we talk also about both people, and this issue start to be concern the European Union. It's not the issue of 23 million Syrian inside Syria, but it's the problem of migration. And it's for me to come back to Professor Helal remark. It's not so-called Arab Spring. I can call it the revolutionary process in the Arab world. The revolutionary process in everywhere can be a tornado, can be a catastrophe, can be a success, can be a failed also. It's not the history who can judge this process. And when we talk about immigration now in Europe, in Turkey we can talk about more than 1,700,000 Syrians. In Lebanon, more 1,500,000 Syrians. In Jordan, around the same number, figures. In France, not more than 1,000 Syrians. Only the Nordic country opened their door better than the others. But why we think about the immigration in the Mediterranean only from security vision, only from the economic vision? Why we don't go and to try to understand the reason of this issue, the reason of this migration? Now it's better because now we talk about terrorism in Europe, coming from those countries, coming from south. In Syria we have more than 5,000 foreigner fighters with what we call Islamic State. Those people are not Syrians, and they come mostly from Europe. And it's not Syria who train the terrorists. They come in Syria as terrorists already. It's not the responsibility also, as every time we accuse Syrians, to send terrorists in Europe. It's not Syrian who send terrorists in Europe. Syria is open space for all terrorists in the world now, especially from the side of the government, because we forget that the government uses terrorists coming from Lebanon, coming from Iraq, coming from even Iran and Afghanistan to fight against his own population. And it's a really open space, and it's now a very difficult situation. The problem also that we talk about come back to the dictator. That as we can hear about the failure of the revolution, and why not we can rebuild a trust with all the dictatorship in the region to protect our security and to stop the migration and to rebuild the same policy in 1918 when we support as European all the dictatorship in the south of Mediterranean. And now we hear that in many assemblies, we hear that to some people to talk about renewing relation with Assad to stop the terrorism. If we don't know the history, it's not a problem. But if we refuse to learn from the history and to read the reality in the history, it's the problem. If we don't understand what is on the origin of those terrorist groups in the region, and the relationship and networking between the regime, dictatorship, so-called secular, and those groups, so-called Islamist, we don't understand the region. I will not talk a lot, but I finish with a very Mediterranean comparison. Some of you can remember that in Spain, in the 30s, it was civil war, and between legitimate representative of the Spanish population against a fascist group headed by Franco, who was supported by the fascism, Italian fascism, and the German Nazism. And the rebels, or the Republican, was without any support from Europe, especially from the socialist Europe. They forgetted them, and they pushed them to go to the extremism, to Stalin. And Stalin, he manipulated their cause, and the end, it was the end of the Republic, and it was rehabilitation of Franco from the United States to fight against the communism. Now the history repeat themselves. Syrian regime supported by the Iranian and Russian, and he will be rehabilitated by the United States and Europe, and to fight so-called Islamists. It's a shame for the history, it's a shame for the Mediterranean area. I hope it will be not happening, because when we forget a huge people, very civilized people with history, he will go to the extremism, and we will all in this room and outside this room pay the price. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kawakibi, for this quite touching and very direct speech with about the disturbing and worrying situation, not security, but mainly humanitarian situation in Syria. Maybe some of you can reflect upon the issue, maybe more directly through how we as scientists can help in resolving, or at least trying to identify potential solutions for this situation. Our next speaker is Ambassador Cosimo Lacirignola, Secretary General of the Center of the International Center for Advanced Mediterranean Studies, Agronomic Studies. Sorry, this is actually the second and the last. So there's only 2 international governmental organizations of the Mediterranean, so of the regional nature. Besides being an international governmental official, Ambassador Lacirignola also advises the Italian Ministry of Agriculture, as he's an expert on agricultural cooperation in the Euromed countries, natural resources, management of water resources, soil and plants. So please give us your insights into future cooperation in the Euromed in these fields.
Thank you, Anna. I'm not an ambassador, I'm a simple agronomist, but I represent an international intergovernmental organization dealing on training, research and cooperation activity in the agricultural sector and food. So, first of all, I would like to thank my friend Hamid Ezoueri and EMUNI to invite me and to give me the possibility to talk about another dimension, food security and probably food science diplomacy. I'm very pleased to participate in this meeting because, of course, give me the opportunity to reaffirm the strong commitment of CIHEAM, our organization, for a sustainable Euro-Mediterranean cooperation. Considering that 2015 will mark the 20th anniversary of the Barcelona Declaration, we miss this declaration, we miss without action, as Ambassador Piazzi said. It is good time to make an highlight on the cooperation sector that still mobilize forces in the Mediterranean region, and to which the European Union could dedicate most of its southern neighbor-oriented action. Agriculture, food security, and rural areas are domains in which the need of development requires dialogue and multilateral solidarity. The challenges to be met call for greater Euro-Mediterranean cooperation now more than ever. If the ambition for a pragmatic relaunch of the Euro-Mediterranean partnership is reaffirmed in 2015, agricultural, food and rural issues will have to be placed at the core of the new regional cooperation agenda as an important way to enhance real innovation, job and sustainable development. The challenges of food security is, we think as CIHEAM, is both important and vital. Important because the constraints are becoming more pronounced. Shortage of water and land, the effect of climate change, demographic growth, and socioeconomic evolution are modifying diet and trade balances. Vital because it conditions the day-to-day existence of population, the development of society, and geopolitical stability. The imperative of a sustainable agricultural production, producing more and better crops with less resources, the quality of foodstuffs, standard, identity, employment in agriculture, in particular youth people, and the struggle against food waste after harvest or consumption, and inclusive growth for rural areas were regularly this year remarked in the recent meeting of agricultural ministers of CIHEAM members, both in Algiers and in Palermo, for the second Euro-Mediterranean Conference on Agriculture. In southern and eastern Mediterranean countries, where a third of the population lives in a rural environment and where 1 job out of 5 is in agriculture, it is impossible to consider the development of rural areas without considering agriculture. Urban and rural must be better connected, as the existing split between them is unsustainable. This is true throughout the world, but is a particularly significant problem in the Mediterranean. Moreover, progress is required in the improvement of connection between research, innovation, and the needs of development. The implementation of research, development, and innovation platforms such as Mediterranean Science Policy Research Innovation Gateway, MedSpring, and Eranet Med, or MERID, in which CIHEAM plays a role, demonstrate that the Euro-Mediterranean cooperation is alive and exists in concrete initiatives, thanks to the European Commission, DG Research and Innovation, here represented by Mrs. Elisabeth Lipiato, supporting the above initiative through the Research Framework Programme. Science and research have a central role to play in agriculture in identifying innovative solutions that are economically feasible, environmentally friendly, and socially acceptable. Innovation should contribute to sustainability and competitiveness. It can accelerate this transition toward a more resource efficiency, greener, and inclusive development. In this perspective, I would like to mention the role of scientific diplomacy for the future of Euro-Mediterranean cooperation. Research and science have demonstrated very good results since 20 years in terms of multilateral and regional cooperation. We need to stress on the importance of knowledge sharing. With science and research, we can maintain the Barcelona spirit and the Euro-Mediterranean vision. In the field of agriculture, this is particularly true. Food diplomacy will move forward if the Mediterranean country and player are convinced and able to cultivate the scientific diplomacy. In 2015, the European Union will possibly, inshallah, have a new project, or at least a renewed political spirit. The outcome of the Millennium Development Goals will be assessed and the post-2015 development agenda will be established. Agricultural, rural issues, and food security are likely to figure prominently. The theme of the Milan Universal Exposition, for example, to be held from May to October 2015, is Feeding the Planet, Energy for Life. And in November 2015, the Barcelona Declaration will turn 20 years. 2 decades after this vibrant appeal, I think 12 countries or 15 countries will launch this Barcelona process. Now we are 30, about to change the panorama, political, geopolitical panorama change totally. The vibrant appeal in favor of building a space for Euro-Mediterranean partnership we must extend and renew this vision and focus cooperation on the common problem between Europe and Mediterranean partner countries. The sustainable development of agriculture, food security and rural territories are at the heart of the international agenda, and these issues are particularly relevant and urgent in the Mediterranean. The sky over Euro-Mediterranean cooperation is currently cloudy, whereas the challenges are such they do require multilateral approach. Multilateral cooperation in the Mediterranean should not be considered as an utopia of the past, but as a crucial political project for the future of the region. This is the CIHEAM raison d'être. For over half of a century, the CIHEAM has worked in, with, and for a united and sustainable Mediterranean. Our organization has carried out far-reaching projects in the field of education, research, and development at local, national, and regional level, with a multitude of actors and stakeholders of the region. Thanks to the experience and trust gained over the past few years, my organization is a culture of practical work in partnership, very attentive to the needs of country and local community, and in collaboration with the regional and international organizations like UPM or some other European Union, FAO, local authorities, and with the participation of the private sector. In the current Mediterranean context, where many exchanges are taking place, the CIHEAM will continue its mission while maintaining the founding principle of its underlying philosophy, but adapting into new regional challenges. Our organization will therefore innovate without abandoning its core activities and in the deep conviction that agriculture, food security, and rural areas are essential to the future of the Mediterranean. CIHEAM, we can consider CIHEAM as a broker, knowledge broker, and I think that the CIHEAM could play its natural role of interface between European Union and Mediterranean country in this perspective. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Lacirignola. And we turn now to the Ambassador Piazzi. Yes, thank you very much. He's our last and definitely not the least speaker. Secretary General of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean. He's been working quite some time ago as political officer at the US State Department, but most recently has been affiliated with the United Nations, different relief and disaster programs and operations. He has been conceiving, managing, coordinating them. So basically has experience also in international governmental relations. We are asking Ambassador Piazzi to reflect on the potential of parliamentary diplomacy as a confidence-building measure for the future cooperation in the Mediterranean. The floor is yours.
Good morning, and thank you very much. And I would like to start by thanking EMUNI for the invitation to PAM to be here today. We were here already with a big PAM delegation several years ago at the beginning of EMUNI, and then after a period where we made a step back, we decided to return to EMUNI because we see the interest and the growing role for EMUNI in our region. And I would like to thank Professor Zemuni for inviting us and for having been at one of our major meetings a few months ago. I had prepared a little statement, but I don't want to repeat what my colleagues said before. So let me make a little reflection on what is going on in the view of PAM and how the science diplomacy can contribute to addressing the major challenges and threats that our region is going through today. As you might know, we are a special organization. We are a parliamentary interstate organization, pan-Mediterranean, only Mediterranean member state, from the north and the south, basically from Mauritania to Portugal via Jerusalem. And to my great surprise, but also pleasure, we had our plenary session last week in Monaco, and many countries from the Black Sea have expressed the interest to join us as full members. Now they are partners, such as Russian Federation, Romania, and others. What is happening in our view in the Mediterranean following the Arab Spring and the changes, all the changes that started in 2011, and of which food security is one of the solutions and address, as well as unemployment, social stress, dignity, and whatever could be the hope for a family, north or south, there is no difference. I think the reasons were the same. At our meeting last week, we had major input from the colleagues from the UN in terms of the present threat and the present situation. Myself, I was in Damascus not long ago, in Tripoli, in Tobruk, and the other cities of the region. There is a polarization of the conflict. The Arab Spring has been ejected. What we see at the horizon is completely marked now by the terrorism, the so-called Islamic State, the terrorist foreign fighters, and Europe is more awake because what has happened in Paris, what is happening in other countries. Already I remember about 1.5 years ago, after a meeting in Brussels at the European Union, myself, I brought a EU document to Damascus, to the government there, with what was the view of the Europe vis-à-vis the Syrian crisis. And there was in a document, I think it was from June 2013, there was one little paragraph about foreign fighters. That has developed a lot. There are about 15,000 foreign fighters. About what is the assessed strength of ISIS of 35,000 fighters in total. Most of them are from Middle East and North Africa. There is a big bunch from Europe. The issue is, I think Europe was not prepared to that. The threat is because many of these people having a EU passport, they can come back without problem. And on top, there are no legislations in Europe to deal with the foreign fighters. Italy adopted yesterday a decree by the government to fill a gap in the legal system of Italy. So what is our role in that? And I would say that Libya is going in the same direction, with ISIS group now taking over some of the cities on the Sirte Bay. On the occasion of the GA, General Assembly of the UN in New York, on the 24th of September, I was there when there was the special meeting of the Security Council. Resolution 2178 was adopted, and PAM has received a specific request by the UN Security Council to facilitate the harmonization, to facilitate the upgrading of national legislation of the Euro-Mediterranean countries, the Mediterranean basin, to include those provisions of the Resolution 2178. The first meeting will take place in Rome, hosted by the Italian Senate on the 26th, 27th of February, and that is dedicated to the Maghreb country, the 5 countries of the Maghreb. After that, and we will have also senior MPs from France, Spain, Italy, Portugal. Most of them, is interesting, are former Minister of Justice. So they have a specific knowledge and influence in their country, because we look also at the regional dimension. It's not only touching upon Algeria, Mauritania, Morocco, or Tunisia, that we solve the problem. There is a regional approach. Then we will have a meeting later on in Romania, in Bucharest, dedicated to the country of the Middle East. It's easier to have on a neutral ground, but the program will be the same. And this will be always conducted with the colleagues from the UN department dealing with the counterterrorism. We are also operating, if you want, on the economic side, because there will be no stabilization if we don't create jobs, if we don't call the attention of the people to some activities where they can feed the families, they can go back to school, and I'm speaking both men and women. So what we have done, and this is the dichotomy, if you wish, of the interest of Central Northern European country for the Eastern Partnership and the interest of countries such as Spain, France, Italy for the South, we had to enter into specific agreements with the European Investment Bank. We signed an MOU 3 days ago with the EBRD, with the World Bank, to attract investment and to fill a gap. If you remember, within the Euromed process, it had been suggested to create the Mediterranean Investment Bank, or to create a dedicated mechanism. Countries from Central Europe objected to that. So we had to find a mechanism, or better, the countries had to find a mechanism to bypass the veto from those countries and find the similar sources. This was done through the G8 with the Deauville partnership, where we participated, and now the EBRD has a budget of 2.5 billion euros per year to invest in the 4 pilot countries from the south. But because the EBRD has a very high ceiling for their project, 70 million euros upward, we had to fill the gap again with the European Investment Bank, where we can address projects which have a smaller size. And this is on the economic side. And this is to create jobs, because then that is the answer. And we know that the number of people who are unemployed, without considering what the colleague from Syria was mentioning, the tragic issue of migrations. Only in Italy last year there were 170,000 people which arrived crossing border. And this is part of this organized crime. Imagine one boat from Libya to Italy pays to the organized crime up to 400,000 euros. One ship from Turkish coast to the West Mediterranean paid back about $5–6 million to organized crime. So that is what we have to address. It's clear that these people are escaping from a war. They need the protection. And we are investing now very much in human rights, protection of civilians, protection of women and children, both in the country of crisis or during the transit. Let me say a few words now on the role of the university, of higher education, of research center. For us, this is part of the activities which have to contribute to the solution. So in December last year, thanks to the rector of the University of Catania, and as part of a process which started in 2008 in Morocco, we were able to launch the PAM academic platform. This platform is a meeting point, is a table where the university, research, the academic world meet the parliamentarians. And together they can propose projects, then they can identify specific activities. We can work together, for instance, at the issue of mobility, which is even more affected now by the phenomenon of ISIS when we look at the north-south movement. The platform is a mechanism. For us, EMUNI has a key role to play as a member, as a partner of the mechanism. We have already added a number of activities by EMUNI, by UNIMED, and the various universities into the official calendar of our assembly so that our MPs can participate, attend, and vice versa. Food security, for instance, the question of education, transfer of knowledge. These are all critical issues. Also us, because we noted that there was a gap in the communication. let's now see how this closed approach can pay back and bring benefit both to the academic world on one side and the parliamentarians, decision makers on the other side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Piazzi, for these insights into current issues and potentials for cooperation in the future. We are now opening the floor for distinguished audience here in this room. If you have a question, comment, a view, please identify yourself, and there will be a microphone reaching you, and then you have the word. So please. Okay, so yeah, there you go.
My name is Hassan Nadir Khairallah. I'm president of the French University in Egypt and member of the management board of EMUNI. I would like to stress that good policies applied in the wrong timing will not lead to great benefit. Science diplomacy is very good when everybody is in a stable condition. But most of the Arab countries now are at war, or for example, if you go to Syria, if you go to Yemen, if you go to Libya, and even Egypt, and talk to them about cooperation in science, nobody will hear you and nobody will be able to understand you. I think that the biggest problem for the West, coming from the South myself, is that they don't understand quite well the mentality of the people in the South. Most of the programs are programs to help youth and scientists in the South, but none of the programs leads to a better understanding in the North of the South. Maybe the decision yesterday of the management board to establish the Center for Islamic and Arabic Studies here in EMUNI is a very good step to that. Unfortunately, what we have seen during the last period, whether we're going to call it spring, Arab Spring or tornado or whatever, is that Europe supported people, and then they found out that they supported the wrong party. They changed their mind again, and then they left us in turmoil. We had in Egypt two so-called revolutions. For one reason, Europe supported one of them, and for another reason, they didn't support the other one, and both of them were instigated by the Egyptian people. So, it's a lack of understanding. They don't understand the mentality, the way of living, the religion, and that's why, some of the decisions are based on, I'm not sure, on misinformation that leads to all the trouble that we're facing now in the South, and everybody now is trying to correct whatever happened. They were more interested in regime changing than in changing the way of living of the people. And they ended up by having chaos everywhere, and everybody's paying the price. It's not only the people in the South that are paying the price of wrong policies taken by the West and the United States, but it is the West and the United States that are paying now part of the price due to whatever wrong policies they've been following in the past few years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe we take direct replies or another issues. Okay, so just go on. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Chevela. I'm from Israel, and I want to relate to what my friend Hassan just said. And the situation is really complicated. And I don't think that you can blame Europe or the West for not understanding the Arab mentality, and this is the reason why the tornado or what is going on now in Syria. But I think that we should not really analyze the situation in Syria, but we should focus on the theme of this conference. And I believe that, of course, today when we see such a sorrow and tragic things in Syria, we have to help, and we have to find solution in the short run. But this conference should focus on the long run. And in the long run, if we want to stop migration, if we want to raise the standard of living of the people in the south, in the Arab countries. We have to focus on education, on science. This is not something that tomorrow, and Hassan was right, if now we come to Syria and talk about science, who will listen to us? However, we still have to, we cannot just wait until the situation improves and until there is peace in the south. No, now is the time to plan programs, because I think that in the long run, we have to understand that only through education and only through science, the standard of living of people will go up. It will stop migration. You talked about migration. And probably, I hope also, for the sake of the region, that it will stop all these disputes. Tornado, as you call it. Thank you.
Thank you. I also agree. Of course, we understand that science diplomacy is not a conflict management tool, but it's a conflict prevention and post-conflict reconstruction tool. So we are addressing this potential in this view. Yes.
Okay. Salman, I'm Salman from Al-Quds University, Palestine. I think the theme you have been focusing on is somewhat diverse, but I think the message sent by Professor Helal, in my opinion, is the most to focus on, related to our meeting here. I think we should focus more onto finding ways to actually help the intellectual capacity of the South, at the same time benefit the North. I mean, you cannot really just get it one way. It has to be advantages for both sides. I think focusing too much on politics of specific region and specific conflicts in the region, we are not going to solve it. Everybody has his own political position, and we know we cannot really convince anybody. So in my opinion, presenting the case as a historical revolution in the South to help and to change the history, I don't think this is a good description. It's much smaller than that. It's a result of conflict, international politics between the West, the East, Europe versus, it's not really that simple the way we try to describe it. And the result is very clear. We have a very bad failure. If it was a real revolution, it could have produced much better. Just one case, I don't want to be political at this point, but I think Egypt case was a very, very striking example. Egypt started the revolution reasonably okay, but then it went downhill, nearly being destroyed. Eventually, the people took care of themselves and they corrected the path. But most of those were unhappy with it. I'm surprised why did not help the new regime to really fix the corruption. That's a case to consider. So we should not keep deaf ear about this. We create a problem in the region, then we claim we have nothing to do with it. I think Europe are responsible. France specifically, England, they are very responsible for what's happening in the Middle East. So let's not just deny it. A third point I would like to say, I think the collaboration through the European Union, as presented by the ambassador of Latvia, I think the focus, you are presenting it in prospect that we are now anti-terrorist activity and this may not yield some support for the scientific development. I wish I understood wrongly. I thought this should not really reflect on the long-term policies of the South-North region. A last point about this, I think the South can help Europe much more than we think, but they should address the real population needs and the real intellectual capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Sultan Abu Arabi. I'm the president of the Association of the Arab Universities. Really here we are talking about collaboration. What we are doing in our association, the Association of the Arab Universities, to work with the European. We have worked during the last 3 years with the European University Association, and we had the first Arab Euro Conference on higher education held at University of Barcelona, where we had more than 250 rectors and presidents from both sides for 3 days. And we talk about collaboration, how we can solve educational problems between both sides. Last year we had the second conference, the Arab Euro Conference was held in Amman. And we are working together with our partners in Europe concerning this. But if you look really at what my friend Kawakibi talked about, the Syrian crisis, It is very tragedy. Jordan is suffering from this. Lebanon is suffering. Turkey is suffering. We have millions of refugees in those three countries. We have tens of thousands of students in high school or in higher education. And really there is no future for those students to pursue their education. I feel that such conference like this and EMUNI can play a good role to help those Syrian students. If we can form a fund to help those Syrian students in those three countries, I think we can do a lot of things. And really I was amazed that all the speakers talked about politics and things like this, and nobody mentioned about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And this is very important to our area. I think this has been going for the last 60 or 70 years, and without solution, without solving this problem, I don't think security and peace in the Middle East can exist. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have two additional speakers over there and then over here, please.
Yes, good morning. I'm Professor Michael Skoulos from the University of Athens and the chairman of the Mediterranean Information Office for Environment, Culture and Sustainable Development, which runs also the network of Mediterranean universities for sustainable development. I wanted to stress a little bit a parameter which, to my point of view, is very important for this gathering here. We know that the relationships, the diplomatic relationships are in most cases among sovereign governments. At the same time, there is the society, it is the civil society as a whole, and the whole network of organizations that cover what, according to the United Nations, is included in the civil society. And in the civil society, we have the academia and researchers as one of the important components. We know that in the international relationships, more and more, the non-governmental part is playing a very important role. And this is the part that provides humanitarian support and keeps the channels open even under crisis. I think that the point of this meeting and the science diplomacy is to this point and not so much for scientists and academics to try and solve the problems between states. Of course, we all have and we should have an active involvement and an opinion as citizens in our countries. But in this particular gathering and similar gatherings, we have to play our other quality as academics, researchers, and as part of this huge civil society that is given a lot of space and forum in all international fora. And I think this is the exact purpose of this meeting.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to add something. My name is Antonio Schröder from the University of Dortmund, and I'm the coordinator of a large-scale international European project called Social Innovation, Driving Force of Social Change. And what my colleague said is exactly what we are dealing with. And as well, Sergio Piazzi was talking about new mechanisms. So we need new mechanisms to solve social problems. And these mechanisms and the social innovation concept is, I'm very convinced that this is a concept that helps a lot, is a top-down, bottom-up concept. So as you said, we have to integrate the civil society in the problem solving to find new mechanism, but also to empower the people and to integrate them. So if I know this from very practical experiences, that it works to get people together from different perspectives, but concerned about the same problem to solve the same problem. So if you put the economy, if you put the politicians, and if you put the scientists and the civil society together to solve a concrete problem, and have these stakeholders also on board with decision-making orientations, then you can solve, on the long run, sometimes on the short run, a lot of problems. But I'm convinced that this is the only way to get a new, let's say, innovation paradigm helping to solve problems of different interests, different cultural backgrounds, etc.
Okay, thank you very much. We have identified some of these very to the bottom fields of cooperation, right? So we have heard about food security, agricultural cooperation, giving opportunity for people to have jobs, post-conflict reconstruction definitely includes those. So there are direct opportunities for active engagement of civil society and science in these fields. We agree upon that. We have another speaker, but we have a colleague over here who has been waiting quite some time, so if you agree, we would give you the floor just after gentleman over here, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I appreciate very much all these speakers, and I add my voice to what has been said by Tony and Michael about being more inclusive and also including the society. But still, I'm a bit confused, because when I look at science diplomacy, it reminds me some dichotomy. On one side, the diplomacy, which looks to me something which is more deserving, I mean, politics or politicians. On the other side, science, which is deserving more, okay, the interest of the researchers. I guess in this room, maybe we are about 80 or 90% of the people coming from the researchers. Some friends of mine are, although they were researchers, they also come from the political, I would say, brackets, okay, dimension, but still a little bit not enough in this room in order to really, no, I mean, certainly, I mean, a 10%, say, Hany and the ambassador, but still, I think, in my opinion, not enough, in my opinion, to deal with science diplomacy. Why? Because from one side, the policy and the politicians, they need to be substantiated, okay, in their outcomes, in their statements by the scientists, by the researchers. On the other side, the researchers, they are not really, sorry, so I'll just come back. From one side, the politicians need to be substantiated in their statement from the research, by the researchers. And on the other side, the researchers, they must be able to communicate with the policy dimension, the political dimension. I think this is very important. So at the end, what I would suggest is that we really try, and be very pragmatically, we really try to establish a sort of really easy communication between the diplomacy, which is something more in the sphere of the politics or the and the researchers. Because as far as I know, as far as my experience is, this is not the first time I hear, I mean, things that have been said or that you have been said up to now. And it's not the first time that we speak, okay, to ourselves, in a way, because most of us are coming from the research world. I would like to see next time, okay, and it's a proposal. I mean, I'm not blaming anyone for these things, for this meeting. Because, I mean, it's a proposal, a pragmatic proposal. So, okay, let's try, okay, let's time to be really 50-50 balance, okay, diplomacy, politicians, and researchers. At the same time, the researcher us, we have to be blamed anyway, because we have to communicate the outcome of the research in a more easy way, just to be understood. That's all. Thank you.
So we do agree that unfortunately politicians do not read the academic articles, of course, and maybe their policy advisors do glance over, but easier communication is definitely a prospect for more effective communication. Thank you for this proposal. We have a speaker waiting over here and then another speaker over there. Just a notice in between, as you have seen, unfortunately, Mr. Lacirignola had to leave as he has another conference just now, so okay, will you take his seat as a representative of CIHEAM? Thank you.
So I am Luigi Amelillo from Naples. I'm professor of intercultural bioethics in University of Orientale and Unipegaso Naples. I would like to remember the manifesto lifelong learning as an emerging right in the Mediterranean area that was signed just during an EMUNI think tank in Naples 2 years ago, with the specific aim of cooperation in the field of education. Starting from this manifesto, we found in Naples a center for Euro-Mediterranean lifelong learning, because we need to organize concrete mutual actions of education, mutual validation of skills, the recognition and certification of training credits. And we need to invite the international institutions, national, regional authorities, and the social partners to support these initiatives. I think there is a cultural problem to solve the problem of terrorism and security in our Mediterranean.
Okay, thank you. A very deep insight into inter-state cooperation on the educational level. We have another speaker, please.
Yes, my name is Miha Pogačnik, and I'm concert violinist and cultural ambassador of the Republic of Slovenia. I would like to say a few things from the vantage point of an artist, because this dimension is missing in setting the stage for the future. 30 years ago, when East-West was undergoing the transition, I have with my NGO group brought thousands of people from the West to the East under the protection of arts, of music, because as soon as you have arts, the platform is raised to a different state of resonance, and people are not inclined to speak politics. Deeper issues come to the surface. So I would like very much to put forward the opportunity the cultural diplomacy is offering, and especially the great arts that provide the platform for this dialogue that becomes constructive. Who is interested in more, we can talk later, but we have experience and evidence. It works.
Thank you. We have a speaker just behind you, so yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Moin Hamzi from the National Council for Scientific Research in Lebanon. I would like to comment that the situation in the Arab world for the time being is so confused that we need to realize and to understand that solution will not come in a short term. This is a long crisis, and we have to plan not only to describe and to do the state of the art, what is happening today, but how can we face it on a long term. In such a forum, I think we have the opportunity to talk about what science can do for science has a lot to do in this situation by a cooperation, by establishing a cooperation between South and North Mediterranean countries, and I think focusing on science innovation in order to create a new job in the near future, in order to get less jobless in the Arab world, might be a good solution for the actual crisis.
Okay, we have another speaker here on your left.
Yes, thank you. I'm George Bornas from the Center for Regional and International Studies and Support in Athens, Greece. So for me, science diplomacy is, first of all, continuing and, if possible, intensifying the cooperation between scientists in EU and in the southern Mediterranean countries. Continuing and intensifying even if these difficult situations that are faced today in several countries in the south. And in that respect, we need to think also if the instruments that are already in place are updated, and if they can work even today in these difficult situations. I'm thinking about, for example, the cooperation programs, the ENI, European Neighbourhood Instrument, and I'm wondering if certain countries in the south will prioritize science in the context of these programs today under the current situations. So I'm wondering if we should not think about new programs better adapted to the conditions of crisis that certain countries are facing. Just to remember that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, specific programs have been set up to stabilize the scientific potential there, and maybe we should think about such initiatives between the EU as a whole or between EU member states and at least certain countries in the south. Thank you.
Thank you. A very concrete proposal, and also with historical relevance of effectiveness. We can take maybe one or two additional comments or questions nobody has directly addressed, or maybe only two people, our speakers. And then after that, we will give our panelists the opportunity to present their closing remarks. So would anyone else like to raise a point? Various issues have been dealt with. No? Okay. Final call? No one? Okay, we have a speaker. Very good. So they're in the back. The floor is yours.
Hello. I'm Summer from Bovod organization in Slovenia, and I'm coming from Jordan. I would like to make an intervention as a young person from Jordan. I consider myself young still, so. And as also an activist, previous activist in Jordan, I think that one of the main things that cause violence in our revolutions, that sometimes some young people, even that they are educated and they are students in the universities, they tempt to use muscles. And I'm not talking only about one region. This is an international phenomenon that first of all, we are reacting with our bodies, not with our minds. So our bodies are moved, and this is what causes the violence. And this is what we should work on by different factors. I would like to highlight, for example, what Mr. Sergio mentioned, to open the universities as a portal between students and parliaments. We should include the youth, because youth is the future. The students in the schools, in the high schools, and in the universities, they are the future. And they should learn from an early age that politics is not a taboo, that politics can be not only about revolutions and going in the streets and I have to ask for what I want. No, you can reach what you want, and you can be a part of your foreign policy, and you can be part of your local policy through intercultural thoughts, through education, through voice, not through just shouting, through also education and through being intellectual. And also the ambassador of Slovenia, I highlight also what you said, we should focus on art, and especially all kind of arts, because arts, through my work as an activist in Jordan, it proved that it is provoking the minds to find their own way. And this is how we can understand the other, not by coming to them and telling them, hey, listen, you should be diplomatic or you should be less violence. No, we should make them find the answer by themselves. And this is why I want to highlight art as a non-formal educational method that they will encourage young people to find their own way, to find their own definition of what diplomacy. We should not tell them what science diplomacy and what diplomacy means. They have to find it within themselves. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Summer has proposed exchange programs for university students to visit parliaments. So this is a very concrete proposal, maybe to be dealt with by EMUNI board. Yeah, thank you, Summer. And since I don't see any hands raised up, I will, in the reverse order of how they appeared in the beginning, give the floor to our speakers to maybe make some final conclusions, solve all the problems of the region, no, reflect mainly to the potential of science diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Let me make some comments, some remarks on what has been said in this interesting exchange now. And indeed, this is an open door for future cooperation. If we start from the lady from the University of Amman, we already have started this program in Amman of meeting between parliamentarians and students. It started actually 1.5 years ago, and we have done the same in Morocco at the University of Fez. This is part, I would say, one of the central part of our academic platform, which goes back also to what the professor from Dortmund was saying. The MPs from the Mediterranean region, north and south, have been made aware of this gap, of this lack of communication between the university and the lawmakers, decision makers. And this was a paradox if you consider that many of the MPs are university professors themselves. This is what I've realized in the national delegations to our assembly. So what I was thinking, also as a proposal here to EMUNI itself, but also to the colleagues from the other universities, we have now a nice car. It's the platform, the PAM Academic Platform, which was launched in Catania on the 11th of December. Naples was represented at very high level, and Siena and university from all the Mediterraneans. How do we put the benzene in that car? Who will drive it in which direction? Now this is something that we should look together. MPs can provide one side of the group, but we need now the university, the academic world, the students, the civil society to take ownership of the process. So one proposal could be to have a kind of parallel initiatives, national level and collectively. National level is we can arrange meeting between MPs and universities in the various countries of the PAM region. Just let us know through EMUNI, through UNIMED, but I look it as a collective effort. It's really an issue of feeling the importance of the program. The other one could be a specific meeting dedicated to what the colleague from Germany said, how do we manage the new mechanism? The mechanism is there now, and outside you will find a brief report in English and French on what was decided in Catania. We have the process will be led on our side by 3 MPs, one from Portugal, one from Italy, one from Morocco, and all the others are on board. So now let's use it, and maybe we can discuss later the opportunity of a joint event PAM EMUNI, as we did here 7 years ago, where we bring the delegates of EMUNI with the MPs and come out with an action plan. So something very concrete, very simple. And I would like to make a reference when we were discussing of diplomacy and the people in the street, and also the perception. When we were in New York at the GA with my delegation, and we met the colleague from the Security Council, the Committee on Counterterrorism, there was a very strange perception. As a PAM, of which Israel, Palestine are full member and have vice presidency, always we push to sustain the negotiations. In New York, to our great surprise, they said, we know the problem. Our priority is ISIS. So there was a perception which was very much focused on a single case, on a single event. That's not work in our mind. We have to tackle the social causes, like when we were talking with the colleagues in the UN about the implementation of the resolution 2178. We can have the best resolution, even under Article 7, under Chapter 7, which means that the resolution is obligatory for the country to implement. But it's not a piece of paper which will change the situation on the ground. Unless we tackle the issue of education, of stability, peace, the situation of family will not change. There will be no dignity, there will be no hope, and it can only become worse. That's why we needed to tackle these issues. Also, I would like to say another thing that...
Ambassador Piazzi, could
yes.
I very, very politely remind you that we have five more concluding remarks. So maybe we will all gather around you after this
no
panel. Okay.
With the great pleasure.
If you agree, please.
I
okay.
agree.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Would anyone else like to say something? But very shortly, okay? Thank you.
Yeah, I will counterbalance Sergio. I mean, I will be very short. Now, in line what Sergio said, I think today, I mean, yeah, it's really the time to do and go in action. Maybe CIHEAM also can join in this because when we said mobility, when we said exchange on what? Exchange because we have societal challenges in front of us, and with societal challenges it has been that they have been clearly spoken out before. Food security, water resources, on top of many other things. So I think it's fine. I mean, we should go and develop. I mean, and support a lot the exchange. This is what CIHEAM is doing since 50 years, and we can help. I mean, in calibrating, not calibrating, sorry, in framing the exchange, in framing the exchange to deal with the challenges of the region, like, for example, the food security, like water resources.
Thank you. First, I come from research field, and I know very well that the Western Center of Research do a huge job on the country on the south. It's unfair to say that they don't know about us. They don't understand our mentality. They know everything. I don't talk about the intelligence service only. I talk especially by my field of research. In sociology, in science politics, I don't talk about others because it's my field. The reference of all those who study Syria or Lebanon or Egypt or Morocco or Algeria, it's Western books. And for example, the main book on Syrian system, political system, it's État de Barbarie de Michel Serrat. He was killed because this book. And if this book was writing as a PhD in the 18th, if we need to understand what's happening now in Syria, we must read this book to be fair with research center in the north. But the communication between between politicians and those research center, it's another issue. I think it's another also place to discuss. For Mr. the President of the Universities Association, it's very interesting what you raised about the Syrian student, and again I talk about Western initiative as the initiative from the former President George Sampaio, who called for more than 1,000 fellowship for Syrian student only. And we have also an initiative we work on, and I hope if in the room some people are interested about, it's Popular University for Syrians. It can be also very helpful if EMUNI can be join this initiative. On the science of diplomacy, I think for the future in this area we need many work, especially for the transitional justice. To comment for young lady from Jordan, the violence comes from the violence. The violence is not the people who decide to go to the street in Syria, 800,000 people. They don't go to the street with the violence thought. But when they was bombarding and killing by tanks, they unfortunately they chose to go to violence. I conclude with something. We refuse to help Syrians, to help Syria for Syrians. Now we must help Syria for us as European, if we don't care about Syrians people.
Thank you. Ambassador Liegis.
Thanks very much. First of all, can I say that for me this exchange has been very much a learning process as well, and I really value the comments that have been made from the audience, because I'm not a scientist, I'm not an academic, so it's actually been useful to have that input for me. And I would also say that I disagree, Anna, with your comment that policymakers never read academic works, because I think that they do get to the tables of policymakers, and I know that certainly in our region there are some of the top leaders who even tweet about academic papers and think tank articles, so I dispute what you say on that. I liked very much the comment from our violinist colleague and the cultural diplomat, because I think, yes, cultural diplomacy also has a great role to play within politics. One of the most impressive books that I've read is about the cellist in Sarajevo at the time of the war there, and I follow very closely also what Latvian artists and musicians, they make statements about the events in Ukraine. One of our top theatre directors has decided that he didn't want to perform anymore in Russia because of as a protest about what has happened and Russia's aggression in our part of the world. So these are all very important contributions to debates within society, as are, of course, the contributions that are made by members from NGOs and civic society. I would also mention that, for me, the fact that we've recalled the importance of this Centre for Arab Islamic Studies that is going to be, that is in the process of being set up in Ljubljana. I think personally this also is a very important step, and I would congratulate the Slovenian government for their support of this, because I do think that this can, in the long term, have an important input to solve the issues that we've been addressing during this conference. One of my other comments is that when there's been reference to the Arab Spring, I recall a comment by an Arab commentator who said that it was neither Arab nor was it spring. At the same time, I think we should also recall, which hasn't been mentioned, that there have been some successes out of this process, and I think in particular of Tunisia, and that would or could be regarded as a success within the revolutionary processes that took place around the southern Mediterranean. In closing, I would recall that the priorities that Latvia's presidency has relate to both competition being one, and I think that it's right that partnerships with Mediterranean neighbours in the field of research and innovation will certainly help to promote competition within the European neighbourhood policy, and I think that this can also contribute to both growth and creation of new jobs, which were issues that were mentioned by some of the commentators, and give added value to the whole question of the digital agenda, which is again one of Latvia's priorities under our presidency. So once again, I very much welcome the academic exchange that EMUNI has promoted and the people-to-people contacts that this conference has given as a contribution to breaking down differences amongst our various societies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Professor Helal.
Yeah, thank you. I tried during my first speech not enter into politics, but I think the whole panel, the 90% of the panel, has turned out to be on politics. I have to make a comment and maybe an alarm. The comment is that this is why at the beginning of my talk I said that we have two sectors, science and diplomacy. Science, is based on facts and never changed, except if you find a new discovery, and but the fact, still a fact. Diplomacy would change with time, with circumstances. You would find, for example, the position of a country, of some country, that for the same case, it would change, because I would not go and define what is politics, but this is the nature of politics. And if we talk about terrorism, terrorism has no land, and I think this is alarm. I remember Egypt had a severe terrorist attack in the 90s, and there was a call for all the world to fight terrorism. And at that time, everybody said, if it is far away from us, we don't worry, keep it for you, it will not come to us. Even after the tornado in the Arab region, whatever is successful or not successful, but it's a tornado, it's real, you don't live there. In science, there is what we call, theoretician and practitioner. All what we have listened today is theories, studies. You didn't live these facts. I'm a practitioner. Even 1 month, even last October, I was in Paris, and we had a discussion with my colleagues, scientists, and one politician, and we were talking about ISIS in Iraq and Syria. And they said, okay, I think we will support you in this region to fight them. And my comment was, don't be so confident. They will come to you. They will come to you. And they came to Paris. And you see the politics. When it come to Paris, what happened? Everything changed. The priority changed. The priority of the European Commission changed. The priority of the United States changed. My message to you and to the politician is that you are not far from their effect. It will come to you, and it came to you. I'll go back to science. My worry now is about the new generation. The new generation now, some of them are refugees. Some of them stayed in their country. They have nothing to do. They don't care about our theories, our diplomacy, our even scientific research, they care to be trained, to be educated. If, again, if we, you, will not take care of them, to let them become scientists, they will come to you later on as terrorists. Thank you.
A bit radical thought, but anyway, food for thought. Professor Ayadi, please, your concluding remark.
Yes, I just want to say one thing based on all the discussions we've had this morning. First of all, it's to emphasize really the role of education, science and innovation, and also try to employ this to create more jobs through private-public partnerships, because we still have the companies that are the ones who will create the jobs, and because we cannot now rely on governments to spend more money into creating more jobs, public jobs for the youth or whoever is outside the job markets. I mean, just taking one case, and this is the case where I am coming from, Tunisia, the unemployment rate, it's really skyrocketing, and the majority of people educated with masters, sometimes PhDs, they have to leave, and probably they might hope of a best, but they find themselves in worse situations if they would like to go to other countries. Now, what is very important again, and I re-emphasize the role of science, the role of innovation, and I completely agree with what has been said about social innovation, and I myself now working on new economic mechanism, new financial mechanisms to ensure that these type of mechanisms are really serving the communities, the societies overall, not only in the region. We need to focus again on the short-term crisis management issues that we see about instabilities, contagion, terrorism, and so on. And I think this is what you have mentioned. It's a short-term focus, but again, it is extremely important to also have a long-term view, because after short-term, you will find another short-term, and then more problems will occur. So then you need to have planning, and obviously science, innovation, education, and job creation is the key, are the keys for the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ayadi. Let me conclude by a brief conceptual observation, since there was a remark that we're all theorizing. Let's theorize some more, and maybe we will touch someone with the prospect of making a concrete change in practice. We have established today that basically science diplomacy is, on the one hand, as diplomacy, an instrument of states' foreign policy, as any other diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy has been also mentioned. There are other types. So states use them to pursue foreign policy goals. One of the obvious goals is scientific cooperation, but the other also may be not linked to science. So they may be abuse of science. We know about this. On the other hand, science diplomacy is also an international institution. It's a field of cooperation in international relations. We've seen international governmental organizations, non-governmental organizations working, regional civil societies working in this field. But what we have basically established that the purpose of scientists is to identify concrete needs of people in the field and address them, and then communicate better these needs to politicians to persuade them to either give money and then make programs which can make changes in the field. So basically, we all do understand that in science diplomacy can function well in peaceful times. It's not a conflict management tool, but it is a necessary and very important investment in times when it can basically function for the purpose that it has. So I would like to thank you all for active participation. I did not even mention the tweets that were going on because you all saw them, and I see quite some action over here. Let me firstly, after the audience, I would like to thank the speakers, and in the end, the organizers for bringing us together. Please keep in touch. The proposals that you made are not in vain. We are making a final recommendation which will be circulated also to you and then passed over to the stakeholders for better communication between scientists and politicians. So there's our contribution. Have a good afternoon and see you around here in the networking opportunities. Thank you.